Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, a podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about the albums that are important to them. My guests this time, guests rather plural, are Bill Orcutt and Chris Corsano, whose new album, Made Out of Sound, is out now on Bill's Palilalia imprint. And unlike their previous album, which was recorded together in a studio in Brussels back in 2018, that one, Brace Up, felt very angular. I think of it almost like these buckled, bent bits of metal. It was very angular, lot of stop-starts on both the drums and the guitar. This one feels more fluid. I mean, it was recorded remotely, with Chris recording his drums and sending them over to Bill to add guitars, which were actually double-tracked as well, which I think smooths over some of those angular edges. This one feels more water-like. There's a gorgeous flow to the whole thing, and even tonally I think there's so many more moments of seamlessness and curved edges. It's beautiful. It feels very live and very present as well for a remotely recorded album. I think that's testament to the fact that both of these guys have been playing with each other for over a decade, but also on their own respective trajectories for so long. I know both of these players when I hear them instantly. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same. It was so lovely to speak to them both. I loved all four records that they picked as well. So I really hope you enjoy this one. As always, go to attentionmagazine.co.uk/crucial listening for more information on their picks and links to their music as well. And thank you, as always, for listening. Please do rate and review the show. Give it 5 stars if you like. Not going to force your hand there, but it does help. And please enjoy. This is Bill Orcutt and Chris Corsano on Crucial Listening. Hello, Bill. Hello, Chris. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Thanks. Yeah, hey.
Thanks for coming on. So before we get into talking about your important records, I wanted to ask about what's been happening with you both recently, music-wise. So, I mean, firstly, it's been almost a year since things went a little wayward in our respective countries, and I know you probably would have had a different 2020 had things been different. So my first question is what are the main ways that playing and making music have manifested for you both over the past 12 months? How has music remained in your life? I mean, Bill, let's start with you.
I haven't played any shows. I did I do one streaming thing? Maybe I did 2 streaming things, which weren't even really streaming. They were like pre-recorded films.
Uh-huh.
I've done a lot of recording. I guess maybe to fill in, and kind of like released a normal number of records for me in 2020. It's to be honest, I mean, because I have a full-time job, so not playing live has kind of been not something that was terrible for me. I've kind of, it's been nice to not be, distracted, because it's always stressful to kind of get the time off of work and then deal with all the things that I'll be neglecting at home, and so to not have to deal with that part of the, that side of it has been kind of cool. And I enjoy recording and making records. So yeah, it's been okay for me.
I've seen a lot of, stuff with Cracked come up this year. I don't know if it's been more than usual, but has that been more of a go-to recently?
I've been, I guess I did 2 or 3 things. Yeah, I don't know. They just kind of, you get an idea, and then it's really easy to, well, I shouldn't say easy, but it's quicker to turn it around because I can just do it all by myself. And And somehow it's interesting because I think it's somehow easier to program when I'm tired than it is to play the guitar. I don't know. Maybe because it doesn't happen in real time, you know? So I can kind of, it feels like I can do it with less energy than it takes to like pick up the guitar and actually like sustain a thing, you know, in the moment. So, yeah, there might have been a few more cracked things. I'm not sure.
And what about you, Chris?
Yeah, it's been probably like everybody more recording focused. So catching up on some old recordings that I didn't ever have the time to get to, say, mixing thing with Michael Flower will hopefully be coming out later this year, which we just sort of finished doing. And then some, online things. And yeah, then a lot of just messing around, practicing, and then wondering how that will translate once this is to the next stage where we will be all back together again playing. But yeah, that's been, because, it's like part of it for me is always, it might work at home, but you get it into a different room where the acoustics are different, or, what you imagine it'll be like when you try and interface with somebody who you're playing with. It's like it's always totally different, and kind of that's half the fun. Or if it's not working, I wouldn't call it fun, but like that's right. the thing, and that's what I enjoy. So like not getting that final step, which is like the crucial one. It's just raised more questions than anything. So I've had a few things in my head, like for the whole time, all of quarantine, where there were these shows that I was going to do, and I kind of was like, oh, I wonder what it'll be like. Maybe I should work on. There was like a saxophone player I was going to do a show with, who I hadn't really played with too much before, Ingrid Laubach, and I had like months advance, and I was just sort of wondering, and I started working on things kind of all random. And it's kind of like I've read that about Sun Ra. He would have the orchestra practice these things hours and hours and hours, and then come the gig, they wouldn't play them. And I find that's like kind of true. Like just in I don't do that on purpose, but like I'll practice stuff and be like, oh, well, Ingrid does this thing that I think is really awesome. I should be able to respond really quickly to it, and have this together or that together, or work on, and then, of course, like inevitably, it's not even Murphy's Law, but it's kind of like a kind of extension of that. It's like, I prepared for all this stuff, but then something else happened. Improvising is kind of about that anyways. And I think that the action of preparing and just kind of focusing on it helps all the same, even if, and in a way, you don't want to be doing stuff that you rehearse to death at home. So yeah, that gig didn't happen. The date came and went, and, here we still are. But there've been a few different things like that I've been like kind of, meditating on for a year, I guess. And that's changed my playing maybe, or maybe it just will all dissolve as soon as I get in a more real situation. We'll see.
Yeah, I suppose it's an unprecedented experiment, right? Like, I can't imagine you've had this long to sit on stuff without any feedback as to like, being out in the field. Right. And in amongst these recent projects for you both is obviously this new record Between You, Made Out of Sound, which was obviously recorded remotely. I mean, was this always going to be a remotely recorded album, or did you have a plan to get together prior to the pandemic and had to pivot, or was it always a remote one?
We had a tour planned.
Of course you did, yeah.
Not necessarily a record would come from that, but...
And the remote recording started with your drums, Chris, as I understand, and I've seen you talk a bit about your process Between You for putting the record together, but what ways did you kind of prepare, or what did you have in mind when you were sitting down at the drums to record these pieces, knowing that you were going to send them over to Bill?
Well, it really, really started with Bill emailing me saying we should probably do a record, and thought of. But that is, things do have a beginning before the beginnings, I guess. And so then that was the thing that I was responding to, like in as much as if you're improvising, you're responding to something. And so I was like, right, a record. Right. And then thinking of that, of just like playing in this room that I'm always in, that nobody else is in, except for, the occasional live stream. That was kind of interesting because, it's a basement and I'm very comfortable there. And another thing was like separating it from just practicing. I didn't want it to be just part of, I don't think it was, because I had different things on my brain. But so trying to make it like, well, what would happen if we were playing together? I would leave space here, and so I just kind of tried to set some things in motion and didn't quite know what Bill would do to them, but tried to leave things. And then, that was my part for it.
I saw you say that you really had to tune your drums to Bill's tuning. And if you're half a step out, then things get a bit fucked. I mean, is that a particular problem with Bill specifically, or a general issue, or is it more pronounced when you're playing with Bill?
Well, what I didn't really think of when I said that was that Bill is a human being with a brain and ears, and he could hear the drums and tune to them. Right. So, that was me being stupid, probably. But I did want to. I wanted to. It's not specific to Bill at all. But just anyone who I play with. Especially stringed instruments, because I don't understand at all how saxophones work. I mean, I know there are people who will, like people I play with they can dial in, it doesn't have to be like this concert pitch or whatever. So if I'm a little bit off, it's not like they can't handle it, but I would like to make things, if a sax sounds good here, if someone's comfortable playing like this, if you're a little bit too far out, then, where the range where maybe someone feels their instrument sounds best, I want to make that possible for them rather than, not thinking of the other person and then making more work for them. But it's not like any of the people, like Bill could totally handle whatever mess I threw his way, he would make something good out of it. But I wanted it to be like, as I would do like that, there's that thing of like imagining like it's a remote record, but what are some things that happen in real life when you're in real time together? And it would be like, well, I would just hear him tuning up and we'd be tuning up at the same time, and whatever that means, it's like there's a lot of flexibility with drums, so that's fine. But, since it was me on my own, I just kind of wanted to like imagine / anticipate some stuff. And again, like same thing with like when you practice ahead of time, it never is the way you imagine it's going to be, but at least it gets your brain focused on something.
That's really cool. There's a really warped timeline going on there, I guess, where you're kind of reacting to a phantom version of Bill, who's then reacting to a real version of you. That's really cool. Bill, when you recorded your bits, obviously you opted for a double track guitar. The whole thing sounds gorgeous. You end up with some really lovely kind of drone textures sometimes coming in over the instruments. I mean, what led to your decision to double track the guitar instead of just going for a single one?
Well, part of it was just that I could, normally. Normally we would be recording together in the room, and then we would kind of, record for a couple of hours, and then we would be done. So I had the, I guess it was a positive thing of being able to kind of just work on it as long as I wanted, and I could, overdub and do whatever to it, and that was kind of cool. It also kind of made up for the fact that we weren't in the same room together, so the kind of interaction that we would normally have, I could kind of compensate for that by being able to add in, some extra sounds. But yeah, I mean, and also honestly, I've been when I've been playing solo, I've been doing more stuff with overdubs. My last solo record had overdub guitar, and And so I've just been kind of headed that direction anyway.
And I guess as well, you say that obviously you could, like, I guess that could have gone on exponentially if you really wanted. But, I mean, was there any sense of wanting to retain some sense of immediacy around what Chris was doing and not becoming overly familiar with, what he was bringing to the table? Because it sounds like a spontaneous record. I was silly. I didn't read about the record before I listened to it for the first 5 times. I didn't realize it was remotely recorded, so it feels spontaneous. So, I mean, was there an effort there to try and stop yourself getting too familiar with Chris's input?
It's mostly first takes. I would listen a couple times beforehand and kind of figure out what tuning I was going to use. But then I wouldn't necessarily. I would kind of just record one take, and then if that worked, then just go ahead and record a second take right on top of it. So, I mean, it is spontaneous, I guess, in that sense. It's a spontaneous reaction to something that Chris recorded probably like a month before. We do have, I think everything on the record is double tracked. There is a 7-inch coming out that has 2 tracks on it that just have one guitar. And it's a little bit more aggro and maybe more like our last record.
Nice.
But, yeah.
Wicked. Well, it's a really wonderful record, and it's out on your label, Bill, which I meant to ask about the pronunciation was, what it is, because I'm sure everyone does. I went for Palalalia in my head. What is it?
Yeah, that's what I say. I think it's actually with it's Palalalia. I say Palalalia.
Palalalia.
But I don't think that's correct.
I've been walking around the house just saying it maybe once, twice a day. So this was my big moment.
It's a good word to say.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. So that's available. By the time this comes out, it will be available. I thoroughly recommend getting hold of that. It's wonderful. You have both brought important records for us to talk about as well. 2 each. First question I like to ask before we talk about the records themselves was whether or not there was a particular framing or interpretation of the word important that you used when coming up with your list of records. So, Chris, I don't suppose, was there any way that you thought about the term important to come up with the records that you did?
Not in a specific way that I thought out that I could put into a sentence, but I did have my wheels spinning from thinking, oh, well, this one, that, there's just so many.
Yeah.
So I picked one that is, I guess, pandemic related, in that I was going to do a residency at Cafe Auto, and I was going to play with someone for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that thing of spending a year looking forward to this residency that didn't happen, and what would it be like to play with her, et cetera, et cetera. And then from thinking more and more about it, it's like, damn, that record, because both of these records I heard probably in around 96 or 97. So about 25 years, these records have been in my brain. And like a lot of things I really care about, that, for instance, like Captain Beefheart, Hendrix, and the Minutemen are 3 things where heard them, probably when I was like all around the same time, like, early teenage years. And no matter where I am in life, no matter what I'm listening to, I can kind of be like, oh, did they must have heard this too and done their take, like it relates to so much. And it's like, I could never escape, not that I want to, but those 3 things I could never escape. Cause it's just always kind of there.
Uh-huh.
And I found that this record, Caroline Crobbles, Now We Are 1-2, it's called, is a bit like that. And I hadn't even realized that until kind of re-listening and trying to figure out how I would try and speak on it. So that counts to me as important, I would say. And the other one's Art Ensemble of Chicago, who are just, again, like something the more that I think about, they've infected every part of me. So that I guess the influence aspect would be how I determined importance.
And what about you, Bill?
Honestly, I didn't try to interpret the word important at all.
Fair enough.
I just kind of bounced around. I came up, I had some choices, and then I had some other choices, And then the next day I had some other choices. But at some point I realized something that it would be that I love, like, unconditionally, and I think it's a great record, start to finish. It's not widely heard. I thought, that's the record I should pick. And it's Jane Cortez and the Fire Spitters. There It Is, which she released on her own label, Bola Press, back in somewhere in the 80s. And she came to Miami, and for whatever reason, I don't know, she came to Miami and then she performed. And I'm realizing there's a song about Miami on this album, so I guess she must have come to Miami before this album came out. But I used to see it in Miami record stores all the time.
Right.
And that's where I got my copy. But she's Ornette Coleman's wife, ex-wife, I guess, at the time she released this, and the mother of DiNardo Coleman, who plays on the record. And it's basically the Ornette Coleman Electric Band with Jamaluddin Tacuma and Vern Nix kind of at the core. And it's poetry, so it has this quality. It's poetry and it's Ornette related, which made it easy for me to hook in my second record, because I've always loved Ronald Shannon Jackson's solo drum record called Pulse, which also features a lot of poetry, I think, on every track, and solo drums. And I was like, the Ornette connection and the poetry connection, I was like, oh, these will make a good pair. So those are my two. And I guess they both came out in the 80s, I think. Yeah.
Nice. So let's dig into these records specifically then a bit more. Chris, whichever one you want to go with first, tell me the name of it and then a little bit about why this one specifically is important.
Let's start with the Carolyn Crabble record. It's called Now We Are 1, 2. And that's, 1, the number 1, and 2, the number 2, not TOO. And I first heard it because I was working for Byron Coley, writer, record label person who introduced me to a ton of music. I wouldn't be here talking to you if it weren't for him. I worked for the label, but then also just doing whatever. And so since he's a writer and a mega record collector, he has a ton of records, and I was putting CDs, moving them from the garage to wherever, and came across in the pile of amazing things this Bizarro-looking CD that it's like kind of encased in like a latex rubber. I don't know if you saw from the Discogs. It's kind of hard to tell. It's hard to describe. And there's like a hand cut out 2 figurines in like kind of colored foil, and that's like it is from '97. I don't know how many people were really doing like CDs, putting like the care into CDs. I feel like at that point they weren't a very loved, maybe kind of more sterile. Like if you, maybe that's unfair. But I would, when I think of like a hand done, say like Caroline or like most of those were records where you might get like a paste on cover, and like if it's Carolina, there could be some dirt inside the record because that's part of the packaging, and then God knows what else, gauze and those Russ's amazing record construction. So then I just was like, what is this, and listened to it, and it's a solo sax and voice record, and at the time I was probably just, and within the last, those years getting into free improvisation and whatever. And there's just like, it kind of just hit me just right. Because the thing that I was coming out of was probably punk, hardcore, etc. And her attention to just the sound. She is from the States, I believe Seattle, but she moved to the UK in late 70s, early 80s, like punk era. So I think maybe she has that too, of like bridging these two worlds. And so the sound on it is just really raw, and she uses a lot of, oversaturated, distorted recording techniques. And I just think it's killer. I love the record. And, that thing of that at the time I was responding to probably it had a similar vibe to me to like Arthur Doyle records, like his solo records, like the one on Ecstatic Peace, and then there's one on Audible Hiss, where it's, just sax and voice, and it's recorded pretty not so ECM hi-fi. It's, and that's kind of what my ears really needed. And that's kind of what I got into, call it free jazz or whatever you want to call it, was like hearing saxophones that could be as distorted and as visceral as guitars were. And it just kind of hooked me in. And then, I guess maybe, I don't know, for me, 10 years down the line, I'm checking out things which might be more like extended technique or whatever you want to call it. Yet the Caroline Crauble record, she was doing that. Like there's like a lot of circular breathing and slap tongue, et cetera, et cetera. And not that I really even was aware of that at the time. So it's kind of a record I can always come back to and find a new thing. Like she just covers so much. Anyone who can create their own micro universe, and probably worth mentioning Milford Graves. Not that I didn't choose one of his records, but he is incredibly important, well, to everybody. But like the universe that he spans so many different universes. But just with his passing, thinking on him too, like that someone who can create this whole thing and be coming out of, you don't like it's not like they just came out of nowhere, but then where they take it to is like ground that nobody else covered. And I find that to be incredible and inspiring.
And as you mentioned, you were going to play with Caroline. That was your own residency, right? I'd say that was going to take place. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was going to be with John Edwards, who I played with a bunch when I moved to the UK in 2005, because my wife was doing a postdoc over there, and I played with John Edwards, which was mind-blowing. He's incredible. And so I've known him for a really long time. And, they're partnered and they play together, and kind of always wanted to, you hear something you love like that record, and it's like, well, could I fit into this world? Like, what is this universe, and have a place in it? And then I think I kind of never pursued it because I was like, well, I don't know. And then eventually I just decided that it was stupid to avoid it and just to try it out. And then because I did that, I brought down this whole pandemic on everybody. I assume that must have been sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to say it.
Yeah, we were all thinking.
And in the same way that you mentioned that, when you're practicing ahead of playing with people, you're trying to anticipate the way in which they go about things. I mean, were there ways you were thinking about Caroline's approach that, particular flags that you thought, right, I'm going to have to be able to deal with that?
That's a good question, because that record in particular, her solo record, I've heard a lot of her other records, and there aren't other things that sound like that, because she's an improviser, she's responding to other people. So you could kind of, and I did this actually, like, relates to John Edwards. Like the first time I played with John was also with Evan Parker, whose music I knew before moving to the UK. Kind of, I knew records for sure. And I thought, oh, he has this, this kind of, I don't know, maximalist circular breathing soprano thing. And maybe this thing that I'm trying to get together would work with it. But then I found in real life, when I would try and put them together, it's like, oh no, that doesn't work. And like his Evan solo circular breathing soprano concept, or however you want to speak of it, like it exists because it's a solo concept kind of, and it's not really a duo or group thing. And so I found that, like, when you sort of imagine these what if situations, that like it's better to not get totally too locked into them.
Mm-hmm.
So with Caroline, keeping that in mind, it was like, well, it's going to be with Caroline and John, and it was going to be a trio. So then it was kind of like the way that her record opened up a world of possibility. Like, there's a lot of sax stuff that I'd heard at that point, but then I heard her record, and it was like, I'd heard, Dewey Redman and Joe McPhee. There were people who vocalized through the sax, but Caroline has her own thing, and it goes in a different direction. So that, I don't know, just like that freedom, I guess, the suggestion of that, like things you hadn't thought of yet are possible. And I think maybe it just would have been to try and push myself and they didn't, John nor Caroline need put, I mean, they're amazing. So like, but yeah, to kind of keep it loose and freaky, keep polite, but I didn't think that would be a problem. But that would be the main thing, was thinking like that I needed to come guns a-blazing, so to speak, and try and really encourage, that rawness and the distortion, like on the record, it's a acoustic property of distortion, but like that to me has like an emotional equivalent, and to try and get to that place, which would be the opposite of politeness, but so that was kind of it. I didn't, with some people I do practice specific things, like if they're very, I don't know, fast, or if they have like more of a jazz language or something in their world, then I think, I should really be able, if they want to go there, I want to be able to not hold them back, but with Caroline and John, I wasn't working on specific like nuts and bolts mechanics. It was just more like, damn, I can't wait till this happens. So I'm still hoping it happens. We'll see what kind of plagues I can bring upon the world by not taking up on it.
And if we were to play a short clip of one of the tracks off this record right here, do you have a preference?
B1, which is the track 2. I think that's a good one. And then B2, the second track. Or
cool.
I'm really bad with names, so I'm trying to think of what's what. Go for that one.
Bill, so let's talk about one of your important records. Whichever one you want to talk about, and tell me a little bit about why it's specifically important to you.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with Jane Cortez and the Fire Spitters. I'm trying to think how I even know about this record. I feel like I've had it for a really long time. I know that Steve Malagodi, who was this DJ who had a late night program in Miami called New Music Miami, used to play it. That's probably where I heard it. I heard a lot of stuff on his show, and I must have picked it up in a record store not long after that. And it's, she's a poet, so it's poetry with backing tracks, with a really amazing backing band. I never really thought of Donardo Coleman as much as a drummer. I guess I hadn't really thought of him at all, but he's so good on this record.
Right.
And there's they get quite a group going, and Bern Nix is great as well. And then there's also from time to time saxophone and various other kinds of percussion. But her poetry is very political, I guess. And like really profane, and kind of trying to avoid saying like in your face, but it's in your face.
Right.
I mean, I just love this record. I don't really have the kind of backstory to talk about it the way that Chris did. It's just an amazing record. I love things that don't depend a lot on some kind of taste to appreciate. I mean, this record, there's not a lot of subtlety. It's an amazing record, but it's not like you wouldn't put this on in the background. It's really like a really direct. She's directly addressing the listener, and she has things to say, and she knows how to say them. And so I just love this record, and very few people know it. There's only one track, but she's in this movie called Poetry in Motion, which is a documentary about poets with Justin Nardo and Jamaluddin Takuma and Bern Nix doing one of the tracks off this album. And it must have been from around the same time as they recorded the record, because it sounds very similar. And it's just an amazing performance. So if you can't find the record, and I'm looking on Discogs now where it's like $90 starting price. By the way, Chris, I just bought the record that you were talking about, because $7.99. I want to get it before the prices shoot up after this month.
Smart. What, the Caroline Crabble one?
Yeah, I just bought it. I was like, like $7.99. That's a good price. I'm getting that now.
It's sold out on her website, but yeah, I'm glad I talked it up enough.
Yeah,
I can sell it.
Good testament. Wow.
So anyway, yeah, the Jane Cortez record I think is amazing. And like I said, there's a track about Miami called Bloodsuckers that I think is phenomenal. And that would be, if you're going to play one track off of it, I would go for something from Bloodsuckers.
Especially the bit where she's like, suck, 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 quite intensely. Yeah, it's a great album.
It's an amazing album. And I don't there's so much great music in the world, and I don't know, many times I hear records and I'm like, how is it that how can somebody give this 4 stars? I mean, this is 5 stars. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many movies too, and you're like, can you imagine all the work and imagination and that went into this, and then it's like 3.7 stars, and you're like, this is just amazing. This is 5. What are you doing? So yeah, this is one of those records that should be 5, but like on Discogs, what is it? It's like, it's not even 3.7. Yeah, 3.75. So
that's not good enough. And if you think back to when you were listening to this record, when you first discovered it, where does your mind go? Like, where are you? How are you listening to this album?
I think I must have been back. I came back to Miami in '84 from college to go to graduate school. And it must have been sometime between then and probably between 85 and 90. So I would have been living somewhere. I had this routine of getting stoned and going record shopping, and I must have picked it up somewhere on one of those trips, and then coming back and listening to it, and it's I'm trying to think what the impact must have been. It must have just been because the other thing is that it's really quite engaging, like musically,
Right.
It's not like you're paying. It's great art, but there's no. You don't have to pay anything. There's no punishment side. It's all positive. If you like incendiary, political statements, it's got that, and then it's got all this, and I said it has great grooves, but it's not like any kind of cheesy grooves that you've ever heard before. It's, one of a kind musicians, who have trained with Ornette, who are playing something unlike anything you've ever heard before. So, I mean, the music is amazing. The words are amazing. And I'm sure, I can't quite conjure up where I was when I heard it first, but I'm sure, I know that I've listened to it hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. And after I pulled it up for this show, I put it on my Facebook page just because how could I not? But if it always feels like nobody really, a couple times, you get a couple of people. That's it. It's one of those records you have to win people over, 2 at a time. But someday.
Yeah, hopefully this does a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess, Chris, you can't really go on Discogs and buy this one for $90. Not quite as easy for you. $8, I mean, big difference.
Sucky, 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 bloodsuckers. Bloodsuckers. Sucking slow motion sucks on the ends of Robin Hood's spikes. Sucking on the cracked heels of ancient Bolito winners.
Chris, let's go to your second record now. So again, remind us of the name of it and then a bit about why it's important to you.
That's Art Ensemble of Chicago, and it's Congo, like Chicago and Congo,
right.
Put together, like CHI-Congo, and got it about the same time. I think at that time, it was the most I had spent on a record, even if it was credit that I had. It was Byron's store that I was working at the time, and I had some credit, and it was, I think the price tag is still on it. It was $40 back in 97 or 6. Yeah, right. And from working at the record store, I could play whatever. And Art Ensemble is just one of those bands that you come to kind of early on. They have a ton of records and they're amazing. Just all the players individually, but then what they could do together, that like universe creation, which they brought through also like a visual thing. And they have their kind of like the different personalities they embody and like the face, like they just kind of are fascinating. They still are to me now, but like, especially when I first started checking them out. And this record is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the first one that Don Moyer is on, the drummer of Art Ensemble. And he's amazing, of course. And and it brings this added energy. It's really dense. I think I'm always a sucker for double sax. So Joseph Jarman and Roscoe Mitchell together, in addition to all the other instruments. Like the list of the credits are amazing because everyone is listed as playing like, at least 6 things, like a lot of percussion. And I at that time, and probably forever, but definitely early on, like I was responding to like rawness and high energy density and all these things. The Caroline Crowell record had it in its own way in a solo context, but this is a band context where it's like everyone is soloing at once, but it's not really a solo because they're all going at once and they're all definitely listening to each other and making something doesn't feel like an egotistical, terrible jam where everyone's just trying to do their thing. It's right. Just people who can play at the maximum and listen at the maximum, at the same time. And it was, I'd seen things like that live, which really convinced me of this kind of music's magic. And so then hearing it translate to record, which was always sort of a problem, I think it still is like getting that thing that happens in a room onto a vinyl CD or whatever is like, it can be tricky. And Caroline did it her way with like distortion and it seemed like multi-tracking maybe she was using, and Art Ensemble did it their way just by being so badass that like the recording and things do seem like I think it is a studio recording. There's not a whole lot of information on the back, but just things kind of come and go, and some things seem like way closer to the microphone. There seems like a little bit of again non-ECM-ness to it. Now this is the second interview that Bill and I have done where ECM gets picked on.
I was about to say something. It's like, if people are going to think that we don't like ECM, come on, man.
I almost picked an ECM record for this.
So did I.
Yeah, it's easy
I was
to
going to
say
go a
that
totally
now.
different way and have like, sorry, I'm busting into Chris's thing, but just because of the subject of ECM, I totally was going to do an all ECM Pat Metheny duo. And I was like, well, that's just too anarchic. That's too iconic. I can't have that. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to bust in.
It sounds like backtracking on your ECM hate to me at the last minute.
Yeah, I don't want to. I got nothing really against it. Afternoon of a Georgia Farm, Marion Brown is another amazing record that I could have chosen, which is an ECM. So, but in terms of like aesthetics that you pick up along the way, or you have it, it's almost like you have it revealed to you that was something inside you that you just didn't know, or maybe you did, but like this Art Ensemble record I just love the sound of it. And in addition to the playing, like there's always something I can pick out that's new. And then there's some really dense kind of free style. I kind of hate choosing words to talk about it because they're probably not the words that the players would want to be used. And so then it's like feel like I'm putting words in somebody else's mouth. But the way that I've heard stuff like this get described, so maybe to the listeners, they'll get what I mean. It's just, fiery or high energy stuff. And then there'll be like these moments of maybe there's like a really short head that might have been composed beforehand. They all hit it, but then it just like explodes again. And I think I have like, for this sort of music, like I'm not, I like things to be pretty free, improvised, but then like seeing that like bit of like everyone just kind of links up at a certain point. And then I think they actually do that just by improvising and being great improvisers. That, but the amount of approaches that Art Ensemble are willing to put to use is as wide as any band I've ever heard, and they're always successful at it, which is astounding. And the thing that maybe I was really responding to at some live shows is this kind of like ego destruction, dissolution, like the people are not so much about themselves, but like melting into the whole band, and then the band becomes more powerful for it. And I feel like Art Ensemble do that on record in a way that's amazing.
Yeah. That feels like a fine line though, right? I mean, especially if you're going for this maximalist sonic, for it to be conveyed and received as people all listening and engaging and dissolving ego rather than trying to outmuscle each other. I mean, you mentioned there were times that you'd seen that effectively done live. I mean, who comes to mind when you say that?
This band Test, Daniel Carter, Sabir Mateen, Matt Hayner, and Tom Bruno were definitely I was sold, like on it. It was just like, this is, I need this, more of this in my life. And I heard it really early in hearing, I don't know, saxophone related music. Even jazz is a tricky term. So, but they're totally freely improvised, and Daniel Carter and Sabir Mateen are both horn players, like multi-instrumentalists, and the way that they would interact with each other, but then also Tom Bruno, the drummer, and Matt Hayner, the bassist, there is a greater good aspect. At the same time that, I guess I can't, it's tough to get inside somebody else's head. So, you could be watching a band thinking that there is no ego involved, but I guess there could be ego in just like, oh, I'm showing everyone that I'm a very good listener and I'm responding, so I like,
yeah.
But they totally, just from seeing them at other times and kind of making sure, like I moved to New York City because of that band. I didn't last very long in New York City but I did straight up move to New York in 98, and I saw them in 96 or something. And so it was like, yeah, I need to be, because they would play in the subway. That was one of the things they did. It was like every week or twice a week, they would go to different subway stops in Manhattan. And I was like, I need to see them in the subway because that must be amazing. And it was like, I was watching them at once, and then I was facing away from where the subway came. I didn't even realize that a subway came and stopped as loud as they are because I was so focused on them and they were just going for it. So I didn't realize until all these people started walking by me. I was like, where'd they come from? It was just me and Tess on the platform. So yeah, that was a totally almost out of body experience. And I felt like time was weird when I first saw them in Massachusetts. So that, and then also Paul Flaherty, Randall Coburn had a quintet that played that same place that same summer. And that's actually the first time, same place that Harry Pussy played when I first saw Bill play. And that was another thing that totally was like mind blowing. So that was like a 96, 90, around then. And so like this this group of shows kind of did it for me. Like the live experience could just like, so then searching that out on record, which is, the different things. It's like you're not there, and you're like, the great thing about live is you can focus your attention where you want or whatever. And then records, it's kind of done for you with how it's mixed or whatever. And this art ensemble, back to the thing is like, but the thing about like the ego destruction is like, yeah, I don't know if everyone knows how they're doing it, but like, I think you just have to do it. You have to keep yourself, if you're focused on who you're playing with or whatever, or just dealing with everything that's around you somehow. And because I've heard it when it doesn't work, and maybe that's me or the listener, not, I don't know, but giving enough credit where it's due. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like at least for myself, I can tell when it works, and I can, at least when I feel it doesn't work. So, art ensemble is like a pretty easy one because I do feel like there's some of the greatest players, just, like people to pick up that instrument, they're no joke. But it takes more than just like technique, but they have this kind of commitment, and then where they're coming from, like their concept of great black music, like I think they see a bigger picture, and that maybe that has something to do with it. And I know Test, the way that those four would talk about it, and like from playing with some of them, just their approach to it is like, yeah, the thing that keeps an ego in check is just seeing that there's a bigger picture.
Awesome. And if we were to play a clip of one of the tracks of this record again, do you have a preference?
It covers a lot of ground. Like Hipper Rip is the more spaced out one, but the one that is incredibly dense, fast playing, that has a bunch of lines that everyone's relating to each other magically is Chicago, the first track on side note.
Bill, you've got one more important record. So again, remind us of the name and a bit about why it's important to you.
It's Ronald Shannon Jackson's Pulse that came out in '84 on Phil Loswell's label Celluloid. How did I come? I don't know how. This record you still find it in cutout bins for like $2.
Really?
I think so.
Wow.
Well, let's see. I'm on Discogs. So yeah, $9.96, $9.
Wow.
I guess is what it's. But how did I find this record? When I was in college, I tried to put a band together and found some kind of like-minded people, but they were all older than me, and I couldn't be stoned and also kind of organize them, I remember so funny because I remember I was probably like 19 or something, and hanging out with this guy who was 26, and he just seemed so impossibly grown up for me. But he had an amazing record collection and played me a bunch of stuff, including the first "Eye on You," the first Ronald Shannon Jackson record, which was just so hard to get my head around. And so I started buying everything I could find by Ronald Shannon Jackson, and somehow happened on this record. And it's poetry. And either recited or sung by Ronald Shannon Jackson while he plays the drums, or there's also a more professorial, academic-sounding guy who recites a few poems while Ronald plays in the background. But yeah, it's just an amazing. The real reason to listen to this record is for track 2, which is Richard III and the Raven, like an 11-minute performance that just completely raving, Yeah, it's just out of control. It's I've never heard anything like it. Usually for people who are kind of like, is kind of well established as this is. It sounds like an outsider record or something. It sounds like something somebody recorded in their basement. Really going for it with no one around. But yeah, that's what I would listen to. But I mean, it's his drumming is amazing on all of it, and I like the poetry, even the more kind of like, traditional stuff. There's a version of Those Winter Sundays on here, which is this poem by Robert Hayden that it's about a father who gets up in the mornings to start the fires for the family. And I there are like certain works of art that I use to torture my family with. And this is one of those things because it's about how, the father makes banked fires blaze. And so I'll always say that in the morning when I'm turning on the heater. But yeah, I love this record. It's a great record. The drumming is amazing. Aside from this Richard III Raven thing, which is just off the charts great. But even the things that aren't like, jaw dropping are really good. So, and it's reasonably priced. I would pick it up if you get a chance.
I love that all of these are now coming with an associated price tag. It's great. The voice as well, like I presume it's his voice, right? On the I mean, you mentioned the poetry. I guess also as well on that second track, there's maybe it is the poetry, but just expressed quite loosely. But when his voice is aligning with the drums, holy shit! When some of those snare hits come in,
it's insane. He has a really incredible quality to his voice. Even the kind of like more folk, kind of like Putting on the Dog and stuff. His voice sounds amazing. Or Slim in Atlanta, but like the Richard III, it's more like an instrument, like the words are only kind of partially there and the rest is coming over in terms of just pure sound. But yeah, I love that track so much. So
sounds like you've dug into his work besides this one as well. I mean, he was in a band. I don't know loads about him, but Decoding Society, right? That him?
Yeah, that was his band. That was the name of his band. So, I mean, he goes way back. So he played with Cecil Taylor. He's played with Albert Eiler. He played with Ornette. So he has deep roots. But Decoding Society was the name of his band that he formed to do his own compositions.
And are you into all of his stuff? Is there a certain like era of what he was doing, or?
There are records that are better than others. I would, for the Decoding Society, I like Eye on You, and I also like Street Priest a lot. I would dig that one up. But I love the instrumentation, 2 basses, Melvin Gibbs on one, and I can't remember who played the other one, but just really interesting textures that, they still aren't very common. Things just wouldn't normally hear.
I didn't want to be born. I am Georgia.
And I want to also go back to you torturing your family. So I'm intrigued, like how much music crossover is there between you and your family in terms of the stuff that you like to listen to, and is there much mutual music you can play in the house that you all like?
We don't. I would say that music plays a kind of not a primary role for the family. It's like like if I get in the car, I'll turn the radio off. I don't want to hear usually any music at all in the car. When in the mornings, I used to play like my iPod or something, and I would put on something that I wanted to hear, like Dylan, or something that wouldn't be too, abrasive. And my son would like listen. He would go, like, wow, like he would hear, a Dylan song and like then like ask me questions about those words. What is that? But I really, I found with my kids they're really not into music in the same way. The other issue is that they really don't want to talk to me about music because my daughter says I'm too judgmental, which I completely disagree with. But she because I see her like listening to music with her headphones on, and I'm like, oh, what are you listening to? And then like I can't tell you. So, but I don't understand why, but
yeah, fair.
But I mean, there's so many other things. Like kids, I think have so much other stuff in terms of like the internet and games and what have you that music just doesn't. At least my kids doesn't play the same role in their lives because they've got other stuff to obsess about, and so.
On the subject of mutual listening, this is like my final question: is there a lot of stuff that you guys both associate with touring together, particular records or particular bands that you both dig?
Like Chris early on made the mistake of giving me access to the aux cord in his car. And,
so where your family no longer suffer, Chris is now getting all of that.
So I have this really clear memory of like putting on like a Frank Sinatra record and then promptly falling asleep. And leaving Chris listening to Frank Sinatra or something. So that's what I think of when
Yeah, we've been more touring in Europe, so it's like more headphone situations recently. But yeah, early driving around, I think Sinatra, maybe Dylan, which I have kind of, and that's like every tour. Certain things hit and everyone's into it, and then other things. And I think I have a big Dylan blind spot. Like, not that it's not that I don't like, but it's just, it's like, it hasn't hit me the way that it hits a lot of other people. So I know I'm missing something,
Yeah, same.
So that was one, maybe like a Led Zeppelin, which for me was like, I have certain things, like Hendrix will always stay with me. And then other things, like, because at the same time as checking out Hendrix when I was 13 and 14, I think I also got into Led Zeppelin, and every drummer must, Bonham's just an amazing drummer, but then there's something I blame Robert Plant. I just like his voice after a while. I couldn't hang anymore. So I think on that same tour, I think Bill was probably giving me shit for not being into Zeppelin. That's what I would say. But I've kind of come back around because I also really am now appreciating John Paul Jones and Bonham together as a unit is kind of that sort of a special thing. So
nice. I'm sure the same appraisal will come around for Sinatra too. Well, Bill, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your important picks and talking through your new record as well. I've had a wonderful time.
Great. Thanks. Thank you for having us.
And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.